Today we're working on a 2013 Ford Flex. We're going to be replacing the thermostat. And you can see right here's the driver's side of the engine with the air intake. You can see right here, that's the thermostat, top of the housing right there. So first thing we want to do is take this box off. It'll be this flathead here. You'll have a connector here. I already took it off, but it's just a push style. And then you'll have these clips here holding this off. And then this right here, it doesn't have to come off. So you pull this out and then you can just lean it over. This cover can stay on as well. So we'll take that off first and then I can get the camera in better, and this has to come off anyway to pull it out. So that's first. So now that's out of the way and we just have it leaned off to the side. You can see right here, the thermostat housing has a bolt here and then one on the other side. So it's just those two bolts and you get pretty good access. So there's two ways you can go from here. You can drain the radiator, get the coolant out of the engine as much as possible, or because of the way the thermostat is, most of your coolant is going to run down the front of the engine. So you can opt to not drain and just have a big catch pan underneath, and the flow of coolant will come mostly towards the front and you can catch it that way. That's up to you. If you are not going to drain the radiator and just take your chances with pulling this out, I recommend taking the skid plate off from underneath. That'll be really helpful. To take the skid plate off, it has 4 of these and they just twist and then come out. And that's all it is. There's one here, one on that side, then 2 in the back, and then it'll rest on this and then it'll just come out. So that's what I'm doing. I'm taking the skid plate off. So the drain for the radiator on this vehicle is on the passenger side, and there's 2 ways to get to it. You pull it down, you can see that there's a little nipple on the end for putting a hose. So you can put a hose on it and then route the hose into your drain bucket, and then that red cap there, you just unscrew it, lefty loosey, righty tighty. So lefty counterclockwise, it'll unscrew it and it'll start coming out of that drain there. That's one way. The other way is to take this plastic cover off. And there's, see right there, these tiny little screws that hold it on. There's 7 altogether, and then these clips here pop out, and that'll get this off. Once that's off, then you don't have to worry about splash. You could probably leave it on. It'll just be really messy because it'll drip all over here, and you may miss your bucket. So the cleanest way is to either use a hose to attach to that nipple there, or take this off. So you can see it coming out. I have this held down. I ended up removing one of the clips, so that gave me a little more freedom to pull this down. And you can see what happens if I don't have it pulled down. See, it gets all up on there. And then eventually it'll just run all around that plastic piece. So just holding it here is fine. You can go ahead and unscrew the top of the radiator, call that the expansion bottle. You could take that cap off and that'll help with the draining. But that's all it is. I'm just gonna hold this. It won't be very long before enough is out. When you have what you want drained out, you can go ahead and tighten that red cap there. And it doesn't have to be crazy tight, just good and snug. It is plastic, so you can strip it out, and then it has an O-ring in there that seals everything off anyway. So even finger tight, you'll notice that it'll stop draining, and then you just give it a little more snugness after that. Once you're happy with your coolant level, then we got this bolt here is an 8mm, and then one bolt underneath is an 8mm. Just a standard socket with a little 3-inch extension works perfect to get it to clear it. So we'll go ahead and pull those off, and then we can wiggle the hose, and then it'll slowly separate from the main engine there. So it's, even with the coolant drained as much as it can, there'll still be some residual in the housing and that upper area. So have your drain pan ready to catch anything that comes out. I like having a long drain pan. This is just a Tupperware. I think it's the biggest Tupperware I could find. And I just cut the bottom out just for this. So it's nice and long and deep enough for me so I can make sure I catch as much as we can. So that's just a tip, that stuff is still gonna come out. So I got the 2 bolt off. So now you could just move it around and it'll separate. Grab the hose if you have to, but it'll slowly come out. There we go. Oh, look at that, hardly any coolant came out. So we scored big on that one. So we got the thermostat, and then there's a gasket. It's just an O-ring gasket that will pull out. if you pull on the thermostat, it should separate both. If you try to get that gasket out on its own, just be careful not to score the aluminum inside here, because then that can cause a leak. So we want to make sure that that gasket can seal perfectly in there. So we'll go ahead and pull that out. I'll probably just use a pair of pliers, pull on this, and get everything out at once. All right, that's out. That was pretty easy to pop out. Before you install the new one, just line them up, make sure, well, here's the gasket. But make sure that they look very similar, same length, same diameter, where it counts. And then you'll notice, this is the old one, it'll have this piece here. The new one has it in a different spot. It's right there, but it's the same idea. When you put this in, you want that to be up on the top, and what that's for is to allow any air that may be in the system, because air rises, so any air that's in the system will go to the top, and then it can allow it to flow through, so for bleeding. If you have it on the bottom, then it's, if you look at this one, well, if you look at the difference, this has a lot of holes, but the new one doesn't. So you can see where this is more critical. If it's on the bottom, then there's no holes up here for it to escape through. But if it's on the top, then that's the hole that it can. So anyway, just a little tip for reinsertion. So let's go ahead and wipe everything down the best we can, get it clean, and then we'll install it together. All right, everything there is cleaned up. If you forgot how it goes in this way, not this way. I believe, let me see. Yeah, so it won't allow you to install it backwards. Some vehicles you can accidentally install it backwards, but on this, it only goes in one way. Once that's in, we'll go ahead and install our new O-ring gasket. Always get a new O-ring. Now that the gasket's resting in there, we can go ahead and put this on and then start threading the bolts in. Once you got those in, they're torqued to 89 inch-pounds. Once those are torqued, what I like to do is, there'll be some coolant kind of on the top here. Get a hose or some kind of water, wash it down, catch it in your catch pan underneath. That way that coolant won't just sit there and start to oxidize and corrode the aluminum up top or any of the wires or plastic. Now that I got everything washed off and cleaned up, we can go ahead and put the hose back on here, the air filter housing, and then this water will just evaporate as the engine warms up. If you took the skid plate off, now's the time to go ahead and we'll put that back on. Last thing to do is fill up our degas bottle and bleed the system. We'll fill it up to this line, let it sit for a second. You'll see bubbles come up and it'll lower. Then we'll fill it up until eventually it stops bubbling and just stays right about there. Then we'll start the vehicle and do the bleeding procedure. So it may right away, once it's started, drop a little. That's okay. Really the procedure is pretty simple. You'll step on the accelerator, bring the RPMs up to about 2 grand, 2,500 for about a minute. So hold it for a minute, then let off. Let that sit at idle for about a minute, and then raise it up again to about 2,000, 2,500 for about a minute, and then let it drop back down to idle for a minute. Raise it up, drop it, raise it up, drop it. That's pretty much the procedure until about 10 times. So do that 10 times. And that's really all there is to bleeding the system on this. As the engine warms up too, check to make sure that you're getting a good hot temperature coming out of your vents as well. Also, when you're bleeding the system, just keep an eye on the temperature gauge as well. If you notice it going up too high, then we have an issue with the cooling system. Or if it never reaches operating temperature, that could be an issue too. So just make sure as you're bleeding the system, it levels out right where it should be. Take it for a good test drive too. Going around corners and things like that, that helps slosh the coolant around. Also getting rid of air bubbles as well. You also want to make sure, if you can, with a flashlight or whatever, or mirror if you need to make sure that the thermostat housing's not leaking. Once you've gone through the bleed procedure, let the engine cool down again. Double check your fill if you need to fill it up more. Go ahead and top it off. That's it. Double check. Make sure you got this plugged in. That'll set a check engine light right away. Make sure you're not leaking. Double check your work. Everything looks good. You're set. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. We'll see you on the next one.